Are you kidding me? Did I give that whole review and it didn't even record? Oh my gosh. I sure did. So let's start this thing over, guys. Oh my gosh. Oh, there goes an hour of my life. Or maybe not even. I don't even know how long that review took. I thought it was pretty succinct. Maybe 30 minutes. Anyways, the book review I thought I already did is Then She Was Gone by Lisa Jewell. And this was one, if not the first Lisa Jewell book that I ever read. The other one, I believe, is Watching You. And this is one of those novels that gives me hope. It restores my faith in a well-written novel, and it just tells me that I can find something that I like. Characters, plots, writing, that it's out there. I'm apparently just not choosing well, or I'm just that hard to please that the majority of books don't hit my wish list. But I'm sorry, I cannot believe I recorded the whole thing. Oh my gosh. And I didn't actually hit record. But I think I can get through it. The one thing I was patting myself on the back for is the fact that I got through it so quickly and so coherently and concisely because I just finished this book yesterday. Yeah, I guess I shouldn't be patting myself on the back if I can't even hit record. Oh my gosh. I'm a failure. This novel revolves around a 15-year-old girl named Ellie Mack who goes missing. She, sorry, I'm still coming to terms. Let me have a drink of water before getting into it all over again. As I said, this novel is a mystery, and it revolves around the disappearance of Ellie Mack. We see Ellie through a number of eyes. First is just like an omniscient narrator. Second, we have Laurel. We also have Ellie's math tutor, Noelle, and then we have Ellie herself. It all starts because Ellie starts dating a boy. His name is Theo. Theo is super smart, and so Ellie wants to do well. She wants to be smart like Theo. She wants him to think well of her. For one reason or another, she does not do well on a math test. So she comes home and she's like, Mom, I need a math tutor. Mom, Laurel, finds a woman named Noelle. Noelle is Irish, and Noelle honestly creeps Ellie out to a certain extent, but Noelle does a great job, and Noelle likes to bring Ellie little trinkets, so Ellie's like, oh, this is great. But then Noelle starts to do things and say things that put Ellie off. So then Ellie comes to her mom and requests that they stop the tutoring. Ellie is on her way to the library, only for her to never be seen again. Fast forward 10 years, and Ellie has been found. Laurel's been all over the news. I think initially there had been like a cold case kind of episode to reopen the Ellie Mack case to kind of bring it back to the forefront of the public eye. Ellie is then found. Now Laurel is sort of at an impasse. Her whole life imploded with the disappearance of her daughter. She does have two other kids. I think the son is Jake, and then the daughter is definitely Hannah. And Ellie was low-key Laurel's favorite. She was the golden child. She was very charismatic, and she was pretty, and she had all this stuff going for her. So there was already sort of a shadow cast across Hannah, even though Hannah's the older sister. After Ellie disappears, Laurel's, all the ties that she has with her family are basically severed. Her marriage dissolves, and she has no relationship with her kids. However, what she does do is she cleans Hannah's apartment once a week. Hannah's life is work, come home, work, come home. But on this particular morning, hasn't come home. And Laurel is like, under normal circumstances to normal people, not a big deal, but I've already had one kid disappear, so I'm going to freak out. She calls Hannah's office because Hannah doesn't answer her phone. The office patches her through to Hannah. Once she hears Hannah's voice, she's like, crisis averted, puts the phone down. After Ellie's disappearance, she stayed in that house, but recently she had sold the house and moved into another area, but her hairdresser is still in her old neighborhood. So she goes, she gets her hair done, and then she stops by a cafe, a coffee shop. She's having herself a little treat, and this guy walks in, and she's kind of like, ooh, he's cute, and he sits at the table next to her, and he strikes up a conversation, and he says, I'm Floyd. And she's like, Floyd, you're American. He's like, only to a certain extent. I had these kinds of parents that we just kind of bounced around, and he tells her how his parents had him at a really young age, like 14 and 16, and they had left him at an orphanage, saying, this is Floyd, take care of him. They came back, and the authorities were like, you can't have this kid back. So they work really hard, they get him back, and so they basically go from trash to treasure. He had not an ideal upbringing, but it has made him into a very cosmopolitan sort of guy. They start dating, and he reveals that he has two daughters. One is Sarah Jade, who's 21, and the other is Poppy, who is 9. He does not have a great relationship with Sarah Jade, but Poppy is the light of his life. Sarah Jade essentially made him question if he was a good dad. Poppy made him realize he could have a really great relationship with his kid. The very first morning that Laurel wakes up at his house and she meets Poppy, she's like, holy crap, that's my daughter Ellie. Now we're like, what? But she goes on to say, this happened all the time in the wake of Ellie's disappearance. I thought I saw her everywhere, so I'm not going to dwell on this. Life goes well, they get relatively serious, she gets involved with his daughters, and they kind of form a little family. She integrates his family into her family, and they do all of this stuff together. But then we're gonna switch over into Noelle's perspective. So Noelle's perspective is basically a letter to Floyd. One thing I think that Jewell does very well, it is her characterizations and the way that she can make us think one thing and then say something else and make us question what we were thinking. So as per Floyd, he was like, Poppy's mom was some kind of wacko. She left Poppy on my doorstep one day and it never came back. He does not think highly of her. He talks about how she was like super needy and kind of was not a stalker of some sorts, but she really pressed the issue for them to be together when he didn't even think she was that pretty. But from Noelle's perspective, we learn that Noelle is Poppy's mother. She's like, look, Floyd, you cannot say all of these things because we both know that's not the truth. We both know. So she actually, first, let's get into the fact that we learned some of her background. As I said, she's Irish, didn't have the healthiest home life. Her parents weren't very loving. She had 2 horrible older brothers, 2 terrible younger brothers, and then she had a younger sister who had died at a young age from leukemia, I believe, some kind of cancer. The 3 things that she had going against her was she wasn't one of the boys, she wasn't the favorite girl, and she wasn't the dead girl. Her parents pushed them all really hard to be excellent, to excel. She goes to school, she does very well, she gets into university, she gets her math degree, she kind of floats around. She had some kind of a career, and then she was like, I don't really want to do this anymore. So then she kind of bounces around to some things, but she needs some money. She decides, let me be a teacher. Let me get my math certification, even though I don't really like kids. She gets it, doesn't teach a single day, but she does start tutoring, even though she doesn't like kids, particularly girls. There's something about girls that she does not get along with. This is how she meets Ellie Mack. We are then introduced to her relationship with Floyd, because he had one claim to fame, and that was like a satirical math for dummies book. It was something that made her laugh, and she was attracted to the guy in the photo on the back cover. And so at one point he was in town signing books, so she's like, I am gonna go meet him. When you know it, they both live in the same area of town, so she stages opportunities to meet him, which sounds kind of creepy and is kind of creepy, except we all know we've done that. When I was in high school, if I knew what class a guy was going to be in, I would be at my locker if it was near that classroom, and in hopes of seeing him and having a chance to talk to him. So on one hand, because we know that Noelle is missing a few tools from the tool shed, that it's wrong. But on the other hand, it's perfectly human behavior to want to stumble across your crush. Eventually, they do have quite a few interactions, which leads to them going out, which leads to a bit of hanky-panky. And she makes a big deal of the fact that she's early 40s and she is like the world's last living virgin. He takes care of that for her. She miscarries with her first child. She miscarries with her second child. It is the day that she learns about the second miscarriage that she meets Ellie Mack for the first time. And she becomes obsessed with Ellie. She thinks Ellie is the best thing since sliced bread. But she's also going through some stuff. And so it's an unhealthy attachment. And she gets it into her head that the only way to keep Floyd is to have this kid. Who better than Ellie Mack? She thinks Ellie is the best thing since sliced bread, and honestly, she's a little bit bitter over the fact that Ellie stopped their tutoring sessions, and she recognized that when they ran across each other for the first time since they stopped lessons, Ellie didn't know who she was at first. Out of spite, out of desire, out of whatever, she kidnaps Ellie. Spoiler! And if you know where this is going, then you realize that Ellie is Poppy's mother. So spoiler! Noelle keeps her locked in the basement, and she doesn't take care of her well. In Ellie's word, she feeds her like a child. Start to have some stumbling blocks because, as I said, Noelle doesn't like kids, particularly girls. And there's a lot of stress involved in her relationship with Floyd. Ellie has begun to discern Noelle's moods by the sound of her feet on the stairs, by the sound of the key in the lock, all those kinds of things. But then one day she makes Noelle mad. Noelle hits her. When she comes back, she brings her this meal, after which Ellie passes out. And the next thing you know, she is with child. But let's go back to Laurel, who is loving her life. I will say the one character I didn't really care for was her mother. Not that her mother was bad, but her mother had a stroke and she's kind of on her last legs. She can't really communicate. She's living in a nursing home. And I guess in some respects she's there because she's the only person that Laurel can actually talk to, because she has poor relations with anybody else in her family. But I mean, not that the mother took away from the book, but she also didn't add to the book, in my opinion. Laurel, she's let Floyd and Poppy come to family engagements. Then after one of these family engagements, her son's girlfriend, who, depending on your view on things, Laurel is not into this stuff, is a wackadoodle. She is very into like new age things, holistic medicine, auras, all that kind of stuff that Laurel just doesn't ascribe to. Blue, who is the girlfriend's name, says there is something wrong with Floyd. His aura is just not right. This makes Laurel very angry, and she goes off on Blue in a way that she'd been wanting to but never had. Obviously that causes tensions, but then there's a moment where she is hugging Floyd, and it occurs to her he's not what he appears. I do not understand where this came from, because by all rights. We'd had a couple of instances in which she was like, I think there's something he's not telling me. I think there's more to him, but nothing that was a red flag. So all of a sudden, after they've had this great, I don't know, whatever together, afternoon, evening, dinner, whatever it was, and she hugs him and she's like, something's wrong. I didn't get it. And this causes her to reach out to Blue. She mends fences and she's like, can you tell me what you meant by all this? And Blue's like, so you think he's off too? She's like, no. I just want to know what you meant by it. She also, around this point, is repairing relationships with the other people in her life, namely Hannah, because Hannah, honestly, Hannah was a really unlikable character, but Jewell does a really great job with her characters. So I kept having to take a step back and say, Beth, you are seeing Hannah through Laurel's lens. There's something else to Hannah. She's not rude and awful because she's a rude, awful person. It's stemming from all this Ellie stuff. We just don't know why or how or what, because all we know is what Laurel has felt and what Laurel has thought and what Laurel has seen. Laurel is getting this impression that Hannah hates her. She always thought that Hannah's coldness towards her was universal because, you know, after the whole thing with Ellie, like that she, you know, had just closed herself off, when in actuality, Hannah has no problems with her dad. So Laurel realizes this, and then she also realizes Paul, her ex-husband, she knows this mystery man that Hannah is dating, which harkens back to the very first chapter when Hannah didn't come home and Laurel's like, is Hannah involved with someone? She sees a bouquet of flowers that Hannah denies. She sees a note that is only signed T. Honestly, I thought she was in a relationship with a woman. I mean, I know I've read this book before, but it's been a minute. And so I was like, maybe this is why Hannah didn't want to talk about it, because she doesn't have a great relationship with her mom, and maybe she doesn't want to open up that can of worms. No, spoiler, Hannah is in a relationship with Theo, Ellie's ex-boyfriend. Aside from one or two things, there was a moment where Laurel had seen Theo out with a woman. There are always those moments where I'm not completely engaged, so maybe there was more to the situation than I picked up on. I needed more foreshadowing. I needed more clues that Hannah was involved with Theo. And then I understand like why she's going to keep him a secret, because she felt like she was the failure because she wasn't Ellie. And so this is the advice that Paul gave Laurel, is like, what she needs is your forgiveness. And Laurel doesn't know what he means. And he's like, she needs you to forgive her for not being Ellie. And this is when you just really feel for Hannah. It's all these layers. It's the onion that Jewell has created and that she continues to create, both with her plotting, with her characterization, everything, which is why I enjoy her so much. Yeah, now she's got all this going on and she has this suspicion in her mind. Let's flip back to Noelle, because now Ellie's due date is drawing near, but Noelle is withdrawing. She's disengaging from Ellie, and we don't know why. Turns out she had been pretending, she'd been faking this pregnancy. So at like the 5 or 6 month mark, she said, this is where I'm gonna have to stop the hanky-panky with Floyd, because if he sees me naked, he's gonna know I'm not pregnant. He, around 8 months, just breaks it off with her, and she blames it on the fact that they're not doing anything in the bedroom, and that he just wants to find somebody else that he can do things in the bedroom with. This whole thing had been about keeping him. She doesn't care for Ellie. She doesn't want this baby. So what's the point? So she just loses interest, essentially. And Ellie is starting to get scared because Noelle will leave her for hours or days and no food, no nothing. Once Poppy is born, Noelle locks the door and never comes back. And Ellie dies of neglect, essentially. Eventually, Noelle, like, neighbors complain of the stink. So Noelle does take Ellie's body, or what's left of it, and she puts it in a chest in the attic. And then one day she's like, maybe I'll just let people find her. She leaves Ellie's backpack in one place, and she leaves Ellie's bones in another. She doesn't work hard to conceal any of this, but I think she had taken Ellie to a dump of sorts, and so it did take a while for people to find her, which is how we open up at the beginning of the novel. She takes this baby to the doctor, has everything officiated and checked, and of course she's like, we're not going to check up on me because that would be a nice surprise for you to realize I never gave birth. But she brings Poppy over to Floyd, and they have that immediate connection. Noelle already has a paranoia, but now envy, jealousy are creeping into her because Poppy is a satanic child when she is in Noelle's care. And I can totally see how Noelle's just not a natural born parent. She's not investing properly in Poppy, in her education, in her diet, in her parenting. So Poppy is going to behave a certain way with Noelle, and then she's going to act differently with Floyd, who does feed her a balanced meal and who does lay down the law and really parents her in a healthy way. Basically, Noelle's kind of over it. Now she's planning, hey, let me go back to Ireland to reunite with my estranged family, and this is going to drive Floyd wild because he's going to see how great that Poppy and I have it with my family and in Ireland and blah blah blah. And she just doesn't like the fact that Poppy likes Floyd more. And Poppy has been making comments about Noelle's hygiene and things like that, and Floyd's just like, look, I think there's a bonding issue here. Why don't I just have Poppy? Noelle gets so angry. She reveals to Floyd, well, Poppy's not even yours, and Poppy's not even mine. This was something that I had been a little confused about because I had been under the impression that, I mean, we all knew that Poppy was not Noelle's. And okay, let's also just admit the truth that I'd read the end. I skipped to the end. I was like, I can't remember how things are going. I was so grossed out kind of this whole novel because I knew that Floyd was Poppy's dad. And yet this whole time he's sleeping with Laurel. And I'm like, how in the world can you sleep with Laurel when you impregnated her daughter? And Noelle had said that she had gone down and dirty with Floyd and she brought some like containers with her. So I'm really trying to figure out how she made it work. And I was like, maybe that's just going to be a suspended point of belief for us in this novel. We have this idea that somehow she collected his sperm and then I guess like turkey basted it into Ellie after she had drugged Ellie. In actuality, she had gone to a sperm bank or something and then used that to impregnate Ellie. Anyways, it is at this point that Noelle disappears. Nobody has any idea where she is. We flip back to Laurel, who is like, I'm gonna take care of some business here. So it's Christmas time. She is gonna go to Floyd's, but before she goes, she texts Paul and she texts Hannah. She says, look, I'm gonna come. If I am late, give me a call. If I do not answer, this is my address. Please call the police. She gets to Floyd's. She gives him her gift, and we see that she has disengaged from him. And then when we get to his perspective later, he acknowledges this fact as well. But what he does is in the interim, he's like, hey, your present is in the car. Here's a card though. I'm gonna go get your gift from the car. Poppy is upstairs getting ready for the Christmas engagement. From this card, she is directed to his office where he has left her a video message. And he relays the entire story of Noelle and Ellie and the fact that Poppy is her granddaughter and he just wants Poppy to be part of her family and not to have any connection to her origin story, essentially. I don't remember if he says it or if we just get the impression, or Laurel gets the impression, but it's obvious that he's not coming back. His car is no longer on the street. He also reveals that, spoiler, he killed Noelle. When Noelle revealed the parentage, he just lost it. He didn't mean to kill her, but he got a little too rough and she ended up dying. And yeah, that patch out there in the garden, Noelle's under there. His two choices right now are kill himself or disappear into that good night. He basically just can't live with himself because he's sort of going to be on the run, because now that Laurel knows about Noelle, he's a wanted man. He murdered somebody. He chooses suicide, and I mean, I knew what was happening in the end. I read ahead. I read somebody's review, which, thank you so much. Except it wasn't the best review. Not that it was a bad review, but it like had no detail. And I was like, what kind of review is this nonsense? I was hoping that this girl had gotten it wrong, or it was just a really vague overview and perhaps I'd gotten the wrong impression by what she said, but no, he does end up choosing to kill himself. So now Poppy is part of their family. They're healing and they're getting together. Hannah marries Theo, and happily ever after, until we get an epilogue. This woman has gotten her hands on a book. Ellie was an avid reader, and during her captivity, Noelle had gotten her some books. And in one of these books, she had left a note. And the note basically says, I love my family. I miss my family. I'm sorry. I love my daughter. Be well. That's where we end. This is a book that I found myself oddly sated by. I thought it had all the intrigue and all the mystery, but we had enough of those cutbacks that I was left on the edge of my seat without being disappointed. Jewell did a really good job at asking or raising questions. And so often I find that, because I've mentioned this before and I will undoubtedly mention it in the future, writers, authors, were supposed to pose questions. Those questions are what propel the reader forward because we want to know more. We want to know why. So many times I feel like it's an obvious question. The author is trying too hard. And so they kind of throw a question in your face and then they never properly resolve it. This novel felt very seamless. Like one thing stacked on top of another, on top of another. We would get an answer here. Like we found out about Noelle kidnapping Ellie relatively quickly. So, okay, now we know who took her and we know why. But we don't know the greater why. We don't know how she got pregnant. We don't know what happened to her in the end. We don't know who Poppy is truly. Like there's so many questions that we just don't know. And it felt like we were just reading something and naturally events would happen and questions would be raised and then questions would be answered and then another question would be raised until we got to the end. And there we go. I hope this one actually recorded. If not, I'm just gonna read my notes to you and that's gonna be that. We're just gonna have bullet points and be done with it. So anyways, have a great day and I will see you later. Bye.